Attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are. My name is Danny Smith, and I am the Manager of Events and Marketing at Microexcel. I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar, How to Avoid the Pitfalls of SAP AMS in the S/4HANA World, as we discover how to identify poorly structured and mismanaged programs and how to create a program that works for you. Our presenter today is Mr. Abe Arriguez. Abe is the Global SAP Practice Leader at Microexcel with 19 years of experience in the technology industry. Just a few laundry items before we get started. All attendees will receive our newly published The Top 10 Pitfalls of SAP AMS and How to Avoid Them after the webinar. This webinar is being recorded, and a link to the recording will be sent out in a few days. Also, we will have a Q&A portion at the end, so please type any questions you may have in the questions box, and we will get to those in the order they are received. If you have any questions after the webinar, please feel free to contact us at info@microexcel.com. Without further ado, I'd like to present our speaker for today's event, Mr. Abe Arriguez.
Thank you, Danny, and welcome to everybody. I appreciate you making the time and participating in this webinar. So just to kind of level set what we're going to cover today. So I'm sure most everybody that's in the audience has had exposure, whether in depth or just in the periphery, to outsourcing services or application maintenance services. So today's webinar is focused on some best practices, and in particular also opportunities to improve your engagement with an external service provider that's providing AMS services, or maybe you have that managed internally. But what we've gathered in engaging with thousands of customers, and of course SAP's long history and deployment of applications at different types of industries and different type of organizations, there's been a lot of lessons learned that have been garnered in the sustainment and maintenance of these applications, right? So if we start from the beginning, and some of these objectives, might seem a little bit obvious, but there's a purpose to restating them, and we'll talk about that throughout the presentation. But in general, obviously, every organization that leverages outsourcing to an extent, whether it's just to support small aspects of an SAP application, maybe just the technical administration, or full-blown outsourcing, right? There's always some objectives in mind that a organization looks to achieve by outsourcing some engagements, right? One of the first most is cost reduction, right? Because supporting SAP applications may not be germane to your skill set as an organization, right? You operate in this particular industry, and you know your own business segment, but maybe technology is not your core business, and that's typically the case with most organizations, right? So you look to an outside vendor to try to reduce your cost on your tactical run and maintain operations, right? So that's always an objective. Another one is maybe minimizing the risk, right? Because it isn't core to your business. There's a risk that you're not up to speed on the innovation around that technology, on the best practices of maintaining that technology. So you want to move that risk to somebody that is an expert and a practitioner in that area. Related to risk, it's also in improving the quality, right? So now that I'm live in an SAP application and I'm continuously feeding and carrying the system, right? If I do it in a way that is delivered by high quality, I have a better ability to have a system that truly addresses what I need for my business, not only from the point of go live, but 3 to 4 or 5 years, down the road, right? So some ambitions around the outsourcing agreement is an external practitioner might already have proven, best practices-based quality processes to ensure that, again, the care to the feed of the system is optimized, but secondarily that how incidents are resolved related to my business end users that are driving my business is of a high quality as well. And in kind of part and parcel to quality, standardization of processes, right? So if I am resolving an issue hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times again, there should be some industrialization of that remediation effort or that remediation process, right? And again, because me as an organization, as a client, or as a user of SAP, are not subject matter expert to what a process is for incident management. I'm looking for an external provider to bring in those kind of best practices. And additionally, by reducing the effort and reducing the amount of energy that I'm having to maintain and care and feed my system, I have an ability to be more nimble, more agile, and get to the market quicker, right? So if I identify an opportunity for business process improvement that then in turn creates a change in my system, the quicker I can release that change, the better quality of the product that I go live with in that application change in turn is going to allow me to get to my objectives from a business perspective much quicker. And overall, because AMS is a pillar of your IT organization or IT strategy, it should, there should be an ambition to have better governance and better visibility, insight, and transparency, right? The reality is that every customer that I've always engaged with has always had an ambition to meet all these objectives. And as they engage with vendors on both sides of the fence, whether the vendor or the client side, there's always well-intentioned communication to meet these objectives. But the reality and the challenge is that many outsourcing programs are poorly managed, and they rarely or inconsistently realize these objectives that we covered, right? So again, there might be other objectives that you kind of set out when you're looking to outsource, right? But these are the kind of the common ones that we run into. So now what I want to transition to is let's put a spotlight on what are the causes of why we're not realizing this objective. So those kind of constitute our 10 pitfalls. So hopefully you garner some insight that you can self-reflect and you can take back to your organizations. So pitfall number one, right? So as we think, right, if you kind of take a step back and do kind of a post-mortem of when you've engaged with your vendor, or maybe you're currently, talking to vendors right now, the conversations typically are very positive. And what I mean by that is that there's grand ambitions. Every organization talks about bringing in best practices, bringing in some standardizations, making the incident management process ever more efficient so that my business end users have a satisfactory experience so they can get to the task at hand, right? And typically the sales pitches that you get from vendors, only support, that ambition, right? So it's always positive. So I kind of like to say, you paint that rosy picture of, of what service that you're trying to procure, and the vendors are very steadfast and very prescriptive in providing you a message that gives you that comfort that you're going to get it. However, as you transition from the sales process to actually getting delivery of your service to your organization, there's a lot of steps in between that need some oversight, that need some spotlight, so that you can set, the foundation of your AMS program off on the right foot, right? So a couple of these things that I'll review on are just some examples of things that we've experienced, right? So first and foremost, you have to get beyond the proposal. A proposal from the vendor. The proposal from the vendor is a selling document that is going to tell you all the great things that they're going to provide to you. But behind that proposal, there's a lot of documentation that talks about not only the things that you're going to get, but also the things that you're not going to get, right? And what we found is customers don't put enough time and energy and forensic analysis of those documents to truly understand how the engagement is going to be shaped, how it's going to be guided on a day-to-day basis, and also how those objectives that we kind of already talked about are going to be achieved, right? So a forensic analysis of the documentation should be absolutely executed. And what I'll tell you is that a lot of vendors don't necessarily volunteer every bit of documentation, that you're going to have to kind of ask for it. And the moment you ask for it, yes, they'll provide it, and they'll give you all the specifics that you could ever need. Or if an organization doesn't provide you, that should also be an insight that maybe this vendor that you're talking to doesn't have all these processes well documented, which in counts is going to create some challenges in execution, right? Now, as you review those, what you're going to find out is that there's probably going to be gaps, right? And that's why, when we cover these 10 pitfalls, you're going to kind of understand the lens that you really should analyze that documentation with, right? And you're going to find that maybe there's something lacking in change management. There's something lacking about, well, what's my escalation process? If an incident is resolved within an SLA, what then? How is information captured, right? What's the workflows and processes that the vendor is going to execute in supporting me and my application, and then secondarily, what's the expectation of me, the customer, of my end users, of my IT staff, right, to close the loop on those processes? What are the tools? What's going to be the central support ticketing system? What's going to be the knowledge management system that's going to capture that knowledge base so that, if we notice that, the same issue arises 20 times over my whole organization, there's a trend, right? We should be proactive in being able to mitigate that issue down the road, right? So it sounds very tactical. It sounds very, obvious, but in reality, not a lot of organizations spend the necessary time to do that analysis because they're riding the wave and the excitement that you've gotten a handshake deal between the vendor and the customer, that we've got those broad ambitions, but you still need to constantly ask, right? And one thing that we've always recommended as a proof point, to effectively manage that transition from sales to delivery is actually to run a pilot, right? And what we typically recommend is grab a small process or maybe a small technology area with a couple of users and take the cycle of support from beginning to end so that you can vet out every piece and every step of the process, every tool, every information capture, and the roles of the team members on both sides, from the vendor and the customers, and do a proper analysis of, do we have any gaps? Is it working? Does it make sense? Is it aligned with the documentation that we're going to release to the broader end user base so they can effectively leverage the support organization, right? I tell you, you'll save a lot of heartache and a lot of heartburn and a lot of just, anxiety by turning on the switch with your AMS provider if you do that. And I'll also say organizations that are already in AMS model right now, sometimes just a pilot to test, how you've been running for the last couple of years is also insightful. So take that away, and hopefully maybe you can apply it in your own organization. Pitfall number 2. Now, in every discovery process, as you're working with a vendor, or even if you're doing it internally, part of setting up an outsourcing or support model is to take stock of what you have as far as application and technology, right? Now, because we're talking about SAP, right, a lot of customers tend to focus on the big ticket items. And what I mean by that is maybe your ECC ERP system or S4, and we'll talk a little bit about about S4HANA here in a bit, right? But the reality is that that's just one of many applications that truly support your business, right? There's other SAP technology that might touch, your core applications because of integration, right? As an example, maybe you're using a tax software, to do all your tax validations as you sell product, and also as you kind of reconcile financial statements and things of the sort, right? And but maybe you don't have that well documented for the purposes of support, right? So we highly recommend you going through a portfolio rationalization to identify all the systems that touch, a business process. And you'll be quite surprised that you might garner some valuable insight. You might find that you've got redundant systems, right? You have unneeded complexity, right? And not only does that unneeded complexity or this expansive IT catalog add to your TCO, it also adds to your overhead as it relates to support. Why? Because it increases the risk of the number of incidents and change requests. So as you're kind of transitioning to an outsourced model, that's also an opportunity to standardize and simplify, but not only just because it supports the business initiative, but also because it reduces that complexity that's going to require much more support than you need, right? So it also gives you that that perspective of what is truly core to your business, right? So if this checklist that we've got here is an example, right? And common data that we like to capture is the amount of people that are supporting an application, the functionality of your functional business process that it supports, the number of users, and the hardware costs associated to it. I've gone into a customer where they think one application is core, but when they do the math and they look at it from the lens of a really black and white perspective, they came out to find out that actually it wasn't core because there was another application that touched the system or touched the business much more often, right? So from an SAP perspective, that can be your core ERP, but maybe you're using an external manufacturing execution system, right? That actually the shop floor is using more of and directly touches and creating more incidents around, and there's more investment and costs associated to it. You've got that misconception that the core manufacturing system in ERP is your core system. That misalignment creates some issues as well, and this is an opportunity to get it right in AMS. Pitfall number 3. Now, I get sometimes some smiles or chuckles from customers when I'm talking about, about when I make the statement, not getting what you pay for, right? And again, we go back to that original point of, when you first engage an external vendor and you've gone through, your respective RFP process and you've done your due diligence, you've gotten their presentations and you feel very comfortable that the vendor is going to say, yep, I'm delivering these 6 items to you as part of my AMS engagement, and you're going to get, the value of that engagement to the fullest extent, right? And you sit comfortably with that notion. The reality is, unless you have some checks and balances to ensure that you're getting every bit of service that the service provider is committed to you, there's going to be opportunity for you not to get the full value. And what I mean by that is really get an understanding of what's in and out of scope, right? Try to eliminate as many of the gray areas or catch-all scenarios, right? So what I mean by that, so one example, right, if you're engaging your AMS provider to provide you system administration support for your SAP landscape, right? But you see that you've got 3 systems that aren't really leveraged, but the vendor's charging you to administer those systems, but somehow it gets included in the agreement and you don't catch it. Again, you're not using the full capacity of that AMS program, which means you're not getting, what you're paid for, right? So you have to understand what's in and out of scope. Now, in the sales process, you should also evaluate responses to the finite detail of what's in and what's out, right? And that's how you should do some comparisons if you're evaluating multiple vendors. Additionally, you have to evaluate the delivery team of your vendor more than the entire company, and why that's important and why that's related to getting what you pay for. If you have a delivery team that has, good level of expertise, has done this for many other clients, right, has done it for the environment that you support, right, they're going to know the areas that, that they need to put attention to on a daily basis, and also are going to know the areas that they could proactively mitigate, right? Somebody that's not as knowledgeable may be able to support, let's go back to the administration example. They'll know the 3 or 4 common things that you support in every SAP application, but if they don't have the knowledge, based to, let's say, support a HANA database, right, they're going to go back to their legacy knowledge and just give you the 3 or 4 things that they know, but are missing the 5 or 6 things that they potentially can get, right? And, you're setting that expectation that they're going to know everything, and they're going to know and be on top of everything, whether it's documented or not documented related to your application, right? So you have to, put greater weight to organizations vendors that are coming to the table with that level of knowledge and that level of inclusion of their AMS service delivery, right? Additionally, to be able to get what you pay for, your system is not a static system. It's going to evolve. It's going to new developments are going to come about, right? Which also means that the expertise of your service provider needs to also evolve, right? So you might get what you pay for them today because they've got a good knowledge base, but if they don't care to nurture their knowledge base, their people, they're not going to be bringing in the latest tools, the latest techniques, the latest subject matter expertise to the fray. That is ever more prevalent in today's world as SAP technology is quickly developing with a whole shift in moving to in-memory, and now with SAP's next generation business suite for S/4HANA, right? That's creating a lot of opportunities, right? But there's a lot of knowledge that has to be garnered and has to be acquired on behalf of the customer. Now, a lot of the discussions nowadays are around implementation, but it trickles down to support. Eventually, you're going to go live with these systems, and you're going to have the same expectation of supporting S/4HANA as you did in ECC or R3, whatever release that you're at, right? The ultimate point is think about what you're getting from a service and getting what you pay for. It's not about just the IT tactical support, but it's about opening opportunities that are going to ensure that the business is supported and you're going to get business value, right? And that's truly when you're starting to realize a lot of those benefits. Pitfall number 4. So now we get a little bit more in the mechanics of the service delivery of the AMS program, quality. Now, when I'm talking about quality in the AMS context, I'm not necessarily talking about quality of a product per se, but it's quality of delivery, quality of the operations, and that there's an absolute institutionalized pillar that gets implemented into your outsourcing strategy. Now, I would venture a guess that in every IT department, and your respective IT departments, that you've got some aspect of quality is already inculcated into your IT strategy. And what we've found is that sometimes we run into customers that have quality from a broad level IT perspective, but for some reason are lacking that from an SAP sustainment perspective, right? And maybe they recognize it, maybe they don't. For those customers that recognize it, again, we go back to the original objectives. They're looking for a vendor to come in and fill that gap, bring in some of those quality best practices into the fray, right? Or if they don't realize it, the vendor should be prescriptive in providing that. Why? Because a mature AMS vendor is going to bring in those best practices anyway, right? Now, one of the things that I think is a missed opportunity is, as an example, a lot of process industry organizations, chemical industry organizations, as they develop product and recipes and things of the sort, you're going to come to find out that there's already quality process that permeate, your core business functions. What is not obvious is that those quality processes could absolutely be leveraged from an IT perspective. Why? Because quality is not germane to one area of business. So I'd say look within some time and seeing if there's things that you can leverage within your four walls of your enterprise. Now, if they don't exist, that's okay. But you should challenge your vendor to come in with some best practices around that, and identify metrics that truly define and measure quality. Right now, a lot of mature vendors will be coming in with standards. Why? Because they employ universally recognized quality standards like ITIL, PMI, and ISO 9001. Those are just some examples, right? But most mature global vendors, go through these quality checks themselves as a way to safeguard their own internal processes, so they're able to effectively deliver to the customers. At least they should. But you need to challenge your vendor, to provide you that evidence that they're going to implement these standards in providing you service delivery. And that conversation should happen early on, and not when you're already in the engagement. You're under the stress of running your business operations. You're trying to close books. You're trying to sell product. You're trying to ship, pick, pack, and ship. That's not when you want to have that discussion. You want to have the discussion when you're setting up the framework around this, right? So these are just some examples, but there should be some standard. Now, kind of, tightly coupled with quality is communication. So communication problems are a core issue when it comes to global delivery. Now, if you take a look at the market today and you look at the market in the last few years, and probably in the last decade, one of the ambitions and why you want to outsource is because maybe you're running a global business, and for your IT department, your ability to support applications in different regions, whether it's North America and Europe or the Middle East or Asia Pac or Latin America, becomes a bit of a challenge. Why? Because again, supporting SAP applications is not your core business, and having practitioners or having subject matter experts in each of these areas that are supporting your local businesses is a difficult proposition for you, right? You don't know how to acquire that talent, or maybe you do, but it's difficult because you're an organization that doesn't focus in this area of business, right? So one of the objectives is to work with a global AMS provider that has a robust global footprint and can deliver in these areas, right? So that's, again, stating, something that's a common objective, but in acquiring that level of service and that kind of global level of service, without a well-orchestrated support model, right, with a lot of knowledge base, pre-acquired or well-defined with very defined and well-documented support processes, tend to lend into some serious communication issues. And what I mean by that is, if I'm an end user that is sitting in Italy and I've got a financial issue as I'm starting to release tax statements, and I'm talking to a help desk person that maybe resides in North America but has no knowledge base of why we deployed finance in the way that we did, right? And I'm calling them, and then there's a language translation issue, but there's no universal translator because we haven't documented the process. That's where frustration sets in. That's where SLAs are missed, right? And that's where you have an unhappy end user, and more than likely, because things are not well documented in one area, that means they're probably not well documented in other areas, right? So that's why instilling, a lot of proactive preparation as you roll out your AMS program, then you're going to tend to have these kind of communication problems, right? Because the reality is that there is nuances within, not only in your own business as far as it relates to the different regions, right? But also from your service provider, because we're talking about global team members that are trying to coordinate their own activities and supporting you, right? So it's really important for you to ensure that communication strategy in the AMS program is well defined, and that's measured, and reported on, on a weekly, monthly, quarterly basis, right? You're looking for your outsourcing partner to truly use a centralized ticketing tool that is well documented and is well communicated to the broader end users and the extended support team, right? So that there's collaboration around the end user and the support team, right? You're going to, again, be able to mitigate a lot of these communication problems by having that systemic, documented approach, for escalation and resolution. Relevant metrics, right? If you're not able to, measure progress, measure quality, and measure service delivery, then you're not going to get the insight to truly assess the level of service that you're getting and look for opportunities to improve, right? Now, there's two aspects of improvement. Sometimes because you're not getting what you're paid for, and you got to correct that, right? And you have to correct that early on, or you're just going to perpetuate that bad service delivery. Secondarily, even if you're getting good service delivery, this is, an AMS program is a living, breathing thing that you need to constantly look to improve. Continuous business improvement and continuous process improvement as it relates to AMS is vital for you to continually meet the objectives, of the program. It's not a one-time event, right? So you need to have relevant metrics that you define, that define success on your behalf, things that move the needle one way or the other for the service delivery for your organization, right? You might already have them, right? Your service provider might already have them, but you need to agree upon, mutually agree upon what those metrics are. I've just got some examples here of things that we've utilized in our experiences with our customers. Being able to track, the amount of tickets and the volumes and the training around it, the costs associated to it, the efforts expended to it, obviously SLA adherence, but, a vital one. Quality, right? It's not only about resolving a ticket, but how many times are we resolving it the right way the first time, right? If we notice that we're constantly having to take 2 or 3 or 4 attempts at resolving a ticket, especially the same type of incident, then there's an issue. But you need to track that to be able to do anything about that, right? Satisfaction. Obviously, parsing end users with the level of service that they're getting is vital to that feedback loop that you need to get to the vendor, right? And ensuring that knowledge doesn't disappear. Whether it disappears because somebody didn't document it and didn't put in a knowledge base, knowledge doesn't disappear because the team members change, right? Knowledge management is absolutely key to be able to continually improve and continue to be proactive and continue to be, mitigate risk, right? As far as it relates to the SAP application. Now, some other obvious ones, and sometimes clients don't necessarily understand, is there's external variables that also impact, your service delivery. It could be the cost of labor, right? Again, we go to the cost reduction. If labor all of a sudden increases in a particular region, like say, for example, in India, it's been increasing steadily over the last 10 years, those costs are going to be borne by the service providers and in turn are going to be borne by the customers themselves. So if you're proactively looking at that, you're going to have an ability to have the foresight to plan and account for things in the future, right? Exchange rates. And then things that are a little bit more reactive, but you should also keep track of political unrest or environmental issues. Japan got hit by a typhoon several years ago, and it shut down hosting centers out in the region that supports customers outside of Japan, right? So if your service provider is based there, it has a potential to impact you, right? So you just need to have a broader perspective of what you measure as far as meaningful metrics. Governance. The program needs to be managed at an executive level, at an execution or project management level, and down in the day-in operations, right? So you need to make sure that governance is another important pillar of your business. It's an essential component to the success, right? So without accountability and responsibility, and it will define across the stakeholders within your organization, within IT and in business, as well as the vendor, you're going to run into issues where some party is going to make a unilateral decision that's going to negatively impact the program, or changes are going to be made without knowledge of the universal impact to the business, right? You have to have effective management and governance to the overall program. And again, it seems like this is something that you would already have in your organization. But what we found is because there's such a importance to the SAP program that it just elicits just further due diligence and further validation that your governance that you leverage already today is going to be applicable to what you do in the SAP application. And your vendor should also have a perspective around that. Methodology for change. So we kind of talk about that theme about your system is a living, breathing, evolving thing, right? So while you've got maybe the best documented RFP, the best documented scope, going into the engagement, and month 1, year 1, the support is fantastic. The reality is that your business changed, so your applications will change. Why? Because that's you need to be able to be nimble and agile and adapt your business so you can capture more market share or grow your business or whatever those business imperatives should be. The application should support that, and then in turn the AMS program should also support that, right? So as those things change, there should be a well-defined change management framework that is going to state that there's a change need. There's going to be evaluation and a planning around that change. There's going to be approval and a tracking to that change, and an impact analysis and an impact follow-through to how it actually impacts the application and in turn the AMS program. If, like for example, if you need to change because you need to move skill sets from bucket A to bucket B, you need to expand it because there's additional scope, right? And you should be able to have a fact-based conversation with your vendor because you've already got a framework to change the level of service that you provide within your contract to adapt it. When those things are lacking, that's when conflict and challenges arise. Why? Because now something changes and then maybe the original players are no longer there at the vendor, so you're negotiating with a different group within the vendor provider, and you can't work under the same kind of mindset that you did when you originally negotiated the contract, right? So it's important that there's the pillars of change management in the contracts, in the program, with the process implemented and validated at any given point in time throughout the engagement. Same related to change management should exist for process management. Now, I'm not talking about the business process in the functionality or business process as relates to your business, but it's about the business process, or sorry, the process around how the service delivery is provided, right? Incident recording, incident detection, classification, the coordinated investigation. How does the global financials team support a financial incident in North America, in Europe, or in Asia Pac, right? Especially when the team members are across the globe in different time zones, right? There's a lot of coordination that has to happen, and without a proactive process management framework, that's where risk comes in, where the incidents take longer to close, they're not closed with high quality, a lot of times there's going to be gaps in the process, and it's just going to lead to some very frustrated end users. Now, all of these things that we covered from 1 through 9, I kind of state them as table stakes or foundational, right? Because it's about the foundation of providing service delivery around AMS for application. But if you remember the original objective, right? The SAP application is not core to your business, right? Sustaining and maintaining is not a core activity, so that's why you want to outsource it. But the ambition is to get to a point where it's almost commoditized, so that you reduce the effort, reduce the spend on having to do the tactical, so it's opened up opportunities for more innovation, right? And most service providers focus on executing the tactical or the bits and bytes here, but the reality is when you change the dynamics between you and your vendor from a client to a vendor relationship to a partnership, is because they should be bringing in innovation into the relationship, right? So if we get really good at doing the tactical, now we should be able to look for opportunities to improve an important business initiative that's growing to go the business. With the innovation around the technology around SAP, S4HANA, and HANA, there's absolutely terrific and probably hundreds and thousands of opportunities for innovation within your own business. The reality is that you're never going to be able to expose that because you're not the experts, you're not the practitioners out in the field that are constantly getting that mind share, that knowledge base, and the thought leadership from the ecosystem around, the use cases that may be applicable to you, right? You're not out there executing projects or supporting other organizations. Your outsourcing provider is, right? So expect them to provide that level of innovation. Challenge them to do so, right? Because they're going to become an extension of your organization because they're outsourcing your technical applications. They're going to learn more about your business, right? If I'm a manufacturing organization and I want to have an understanding about how blockchain is going to impact me down the road, your partner should be a thought leader and should provide you some ideas around that. Whether you're pulling it from them or pushing from them, it should be bilateral, right? And then secondarily, if you've really got a conscientious AMS provider, these technology innovations also simplifying what you do today. And what I mean by that, if you're a customer that went from R3 or ECC, right, and you've already got an existing AMS provider supporting it, right? Well, with the massive simplification in S4HANA, when you migrate to it, the need, for FTEs or effort to support the applications get reduced. Why? Because the data footprint and the application footprint gets reduced. Finance went from 13 tables to 5 tables, right? Less enhancements. less administration, right? Less database reorg. Those savings should trickle down to you, right? The conscientious, the thought leader, the innovative vendor is going to bring those savings and simplifications to bear, right? But they need to also look for opportunities for you where you're well positioned to, adopt them. These disruptive technologies, whether it's SAP Leonardo or S/4HANA or whatever, might come about to your organization. So really, in conclusion, right? So we covered, a lot of core tenets of an AMS program, right? Things that should be in every program. They should be universally, implemented and accepted and adhered to, right? But that well-designed approach, well-orchestrated approach, and well-documented and well-communicated is where you need to start, so you can establish a great, healthy foundation for support. It's the fundamentals. It's like get back to the basics and do those well, right? And once you do that, evaluate, but you should even challenge it early on, evaluate, the role of innovation in your partnership, right? Is your partner helping you become a first mover or a trendsetter within your respective industry, right? And when you get a partner that provides you that ability to provide that ilk of thought leadership, now you've got a partner that's looking at the big picture alongside with you. And only then are you going to really yield the real benefits that you originally sought out for your organization in looking and outsourcing, right? So hopefully, these 10 pitfalls that we covered, give you an opportunity to kind of take a look back and see if you've got some of these things already implemented in your AMS program. Or have you already thought about them? Maybe you have, but maybe it's an opportunity to review them. And if you ask your question and they're missing, maybe it's an opportunity to implement them as well, right? So, we appreciate you taking the time today to listen to this. As part of this webinar, after this webinar, we're actually going to deliver a white paper that goes into these pitfalls into greater detail. So hopefully you find that as an educational asset, right? And if you want to find more about, our perspective and our AMS offerings, please go to microexcel.com to this particular link, right? But just to give you a little bit of sense of who Microexcel is, we are a global outsourcing provider, been around for since 2001, but what's been driving our organization is supporting and being a partner to global customers across all different regions with our 1,500 practitioners across the globe, right? And we've looked to become a trusted advisor, a thought leader for our engagement. So go to our website, find out some more information about Microexcel. Appreciate your time. And at this point, we'll transition back to Danny to go into our Q&A session.
Thank you, Abe. It looks like we have had a question come through during your presentation, and that question is, what do you think is the biggest missed opportunity in AMS engagements for IT?
So I do really think it's around being able to do things quicker and more simply. For every customer that I've always worked with, I've always found that the outsourcing program almost takes a life of its own, and it actually complicates the IT organization rather than simplifies it. And it's because a lot of these things get missed. But when you look to outsource, right, the missed opportunities to do the block and tackle activities, more quickly, more efficiently, with less effort and less energy, so that you could truly open up both the business, the IT organization, within the client, and for your outsourcing provider to do more innovative things, right? And in turn, because you're providing a high-level service, your business user is not only satisfied and happy with the level of support, they themselves, because now they're more engaged in their core business, their mind is going to stay focused into what they do and look for opportunities to innovate their business from whatever line of business that they focus on, right? But if they're distracted by outsourcing, if they're distracted by incidents, they'll never get there. Great question.
Great. Thank you, Abe. It looks like our next question is, We have our own processes for support. Should we use the vendor or ours?
So that's also a question I get asked quite a bit from customers, right? Unfortunately, and it's not unfortunately, it's really, it depends, right? I think you need to have a perspective of how you want your service delivery executed, right? If you feel very confident in your own processes for support, because maybe you've been leveraging SAP for a decade, right? And you've developed a lot of best practices within your organization, but now you want to shift away, and move some of your resources to do other things within the IT organization. But you've invested so much time and energy, they're proven within your organization, they're well adopted. Well, you should maintain your own processes, right? And the good and nimble service provider will adjust, right? They will adapt their own approach around your process framework. Of course, there's going to be things that make the vendor secret sauce. I know there is some on some of our sides, but there should be some adaptability to come up with a personalized solution for you, right? Now, if you don't feel confident in those processes, right, then look for opportunities to adopt the service providers, right? If again they're able to articulate that they are very process rich, quality rich, and they've been proven at other clientele.
Thank you, Abe. Our next question is that SAP Hybris play any major role in S/4HANA?
Sorry, Danny, can you repeat that first part again?
Sure. Does SAP Hybris play any major role in S/4HANA?
It does. So the way that S/4HANA nowadays is set up, it is a platform, and SAP calls it the digital core, right? So before, ECC or old ERP was really kind of tightly governed, and there was very well-defined four walls around the application. And S4, there's an opportunity for extensibility. So when it comes to customer engagement, digital marketing, Hybris becomes that extension to the client-facing business processes within the S/4HANA ERP or Enterprise Management Core, right? So it does play a role. So that this is an area, when we were talking about this application rationalization, that not only do you need to identify that Hybris exists into your footprint, right, but there's integration scenarios that exist between S/4HANA Enterprise Core and Hybris that are standard, that are supported, but they're also gotchas, right? But you're only going to be able to learn that about those if you document them, right? And if your service provider comes with a perspective of how they're going to sustain and maintain them. And it's not just about the Hybris application, S/4HANA Enterprise Management application. It's the interweaving between the two.
Thank you, Abe. It looks like we have one more question, which is, I thought cloud didn't need AMS support.
That's a common misconception. So when we think about cloud, right? So it is software as a service. So you're getting access to the software, right? And not having to install the application within your four walls of your enterprise, within your firewall, are probably more technically accurate, right? But it is still an application, right? So what means is, while maybe the administration, maybe the updates are part of the subscription, and they are for SAP Cloud products, right? But the functional support is not. And what I mean by that is, let's say you're leveraging S/4HANA Cloud, which is something that SAP has been, really aggressively positioning with their customers, and customers are starting to adopt, right? They'll take care of the system administration, right? They'll take care of the uptime associated to it. But if you need to, as an example, maybe change your order management process, or you need to provide support to your field salespeople and customer service agents that are out across the regions, that is not part of the service out of S/4HANA Cloud, right? So you need to have some support mechanism for functional support, right? And then that's one aspect of it. And secondarily, remember, it's still an application, so there's still security standards, there's data privacy standards that you need to consider in your AMS program, and the cloud projects are just an extension of that.
Thank you, Abe. It looks like we've had another question come through, and that is, is AMS most likely applicable to only HANA, S4HANA, or for other platforms as well?
It's really for all platforms. So if there's ever an application that touches a business user, that if they don't have access to the application or is not supporting a particular business process that they need to be able to execute or provide them information for decision support, then it should be supported, right? So there's two options. You could either support it internally, or you could support it, externally, right? And that's all what application maintenance services are about, right? So it should be part of it, right? And kind of if you go back to that pitfall number 2 around the application rationalization exercise, that if you truly don't document every technology within the SAP portfolio that you leverage to the minute detail, there's potential gaps and gotchas that you're baking into your program that eventually might be a risk to your business.
Thank you, Abe. As there are no more questions, this does conclude today's webinar. A recording of this will be sent to all participants, as well as a copy of the top 10 pitfalls of SAP AMS and how to avoid them. In the meantime, if you do have any questions, please email info@microexcel.com. Thank you and have a wonderful day.